Hi, my name is Stan.
My name is Connie.
My name is Judy.
My name is Eileen, and I'm a caregiver to my mother.
And I care for my mother, Octavia.
And I'm a caregiver for my mother.
And I'm a caregiver to my husband, Art.
I'm a caregiver for my wife, Ann, who's 72 years old.
Basically, I've done everything for providing for both of them.
I take care of my mother on the weekends. I take her grocery shopping.
Not only household chores.
I provide her medical care, coordination, driving, errands.
Choosing meals, making meals, cleaning up.
I find that I take care of anything that he can't take care of.
Sometimes I find balancing time a real challenge.
The difficult part for me is taking me into consideration.
Balancing her needs with the needs of my family, the needs of my marriage, and my own needs.
Staying calm, nice, and positive.
The real challenge is, of course, the distance and the moment you get that last phone call.
What I love most about taking care of her is knowing that we're providing a secure and comfortable home for her.
It's the time we spend together.
Is the adventure of finding out new things all the time to trying to help him stay out of pain.
My name is Ed. I'm a spouse and I'm a caregiver.
My name is Colette. I'm a daughter and a caregiver.
I'm a caregiver, and I'm a daughter.
And I'm a wife and a caregiver.
I'm a daughter and a caregiver.
I'm a son, a nephew, and a caregiver.
Hi, my name is Deborah Day, and I help manage United Way Caregivers Coalition. While caring for a loved one has its special rewards, it's a very challenging job. It can be stressful, overwhelming, and sometimes lonely. Each caregiving situation is unique, but all caregivers share the need for information and support. And that's where the Caregivers Coalition comes in. We help caregivers receive the support they need to take care of their loved ones and to take care of themselves. Caregivers who lead healthy, productive lives will be better caregivers. The most important thing to remember is that as a caregiver, you're not alone.
Enough is enough in this context is a little slower, and it really is at some point you come to the conclusion that you need more help or something's amiss, and you maybe you're aware of it, maybe somebody else is aware of it, but the idea of enough is enough is something that we're all very familiar with, and it means that the end of something has come and the beginning of something else has to start. So when we're talking about people with chronic illnesses, and my specialty is dementia, so it could be any chronic illness, and there's a dynamic that happens with anyone with a chronic illness, and it has to do with the progression, the identification of the illness, and then how it progresses, and what the person with the illness knows, what they're willing to accept, and how it moves forward. And how it moves forward are all the little decisions that happen basically minute by minute, because you're dealing with someone who's ill, and you're attending to the illness. And hopefully you know something about the illness, and with dementia, if you don't know something about the illness, you're going to be really surprised along the way. So I highly recommend that you learn everything you could possibly learn about dementia, because it can take you by surprise. And then as it goes along, other kinds of things can happen. Somebody can fall, they can trip, their eyes can go bad, their hearing can go bad. So whatever the illness is, that it all gets complicated. So the enough is enough part can come at any point along the way, unexpectedly. But what I generally think about is the long haul, and starting out with what do you need to know and when do you need to know it. You need to know as much as possible up front, and that's really the sum and substance of what I'm going to tell you today, because I think the rest of it you can figure out, but we'll run through it so you get the idea of where problems can happen. A bunch of years ago, I had a very good friend who was also a psychotherapist, one of the smartest people I know. She was beautiful, she was elegant, and she had dementia in her background. Her father had serious dementia. And she moved out of town, so I got to see her maybe 3-4 times a year. And over that time, we just got together, we would have lunch, And we go our various ways. And then one year, she just started to do things that were very uncharacteristic of her. We were at a restaurant, and she says, "Garçon," this is a woman who's quiet, a little bit shy. But I said, well, she was having a moment. And then she started to, the next time I saw her was the summer, and she's wearing these clothes. She's something about the sun, and she can't tolerate the sun. We used to walk around New York City together, so I didn't know what that was. It finally got to a point where, and again, this is over a period of time, so I'm observing something and really was not putting together the two and two. I don't live with her. I'm not responsible to her, nor she to me. But we met for lunch again, and she said, I'm really not sure how to get back on that highway. I said, don't worry, I have to go the opposite direction, but I can get you to that point, and then I'll go one way, you'll go the other. So we did. We come down a very empty road, which was the good news. I get to a stop sign, I wave her on, and she goes directly through the stop sign. I said, oh, there's a problem. This is not a woman who doesn't see stop signs. The next thing I know, she called me about a week or so later, and she said, did you call the police and tell them that I wasn't driving well? And I said, no, why would I do that? It never occurred to me to do that. It was, if she'd been in a real accident, I would have said, but it was an empty road. It turns out that she got on the highway going north, supposedly going north, except she was going south. So the police did stop her, and it was they who told her she could no longer drive her car. So that was her wake-up call. And again, a very smart person. She had dementia in her history. It was the wake-up call where she was able to say, and this is not the most usual case scenario, she said, okay, I now need my diagnosis. I need to know what to do. And she started to organize. And over the next couple of years, she set things up very nicely for herself and for her husband. They talked about it. They worked through what they needed to do, except there were some other little problems that cropped up along the way. His health was not very good. He ended up in the hospital at one point. She did not have, and at that point, they had moved for financial reasons. The other thing that I should tell you is she had told me many years ago that she was very proud of herself because she had invested a tremendous amount of money, and so when she retired, she was going to be very comfortable. I cannot tell you how envious I felt of her. But at this point, then it came to pass that, in fact, the person that she was using to invest her money was not paying such great attention, and during 2008, she lost a tremendous amount of money. So now she's got a sick husband. They had to move. They moved into a very nice place, but nevertheless, it was well away from where she was familiar. She didn't know a lot of people. And he's at a hospital, and she was at the hospital, but she couldn't drive home. And she knew she couldn't drive home. It was dark. She didn't know the roads. So she ended up staying overnight, but that again presented a whole other set of problems. How are they going to manage this? They ended up moving again, so in a period of 2 years, they moved 4 times. Now, she was alert. She knew what she was doing, but as you know, any move can be tumultuous. They ended up moving down to down south to where their children lived, which was the good news. So, but it was a step-by-step thing, and every time I talked to her, I could see one little thing building up, building up, building up. But she ended up in a decent place with family around her, and I believe that her husband's condition worsened. So the good news about them is that they weren't in denial, and it was a slow progression, and there was time to kind of maneuver and for her to figure out what she did need to do, what she didn't need to do, and so it worked out reasonably nicely. You may know that denial has 2 sides. There's healthy denial, and there's not so healthy denial. The healthy denial is there's a point at which you might not need to know everything. You might not need to think about it at all. You might need to be able to put it to the side. So that as long as you can maintain your routines and you have appropriate care in place, a person with dementia can often continue on with their lives without interruption, because they're doing okay. It requires, however, people around that person to be very cognizant of what they can and cannot do. However, that's a healthy denial. You continue your life. You're okay. So Harry and Marilyn were a couple that I've been working with, and he was diagnosed 2 years ago. This is probably one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. Just very heady, very esoteric, very, I don't know what he's talking about half the time, and it's not because of the dementia, it's because of me. But he is a really, really interesting man, and he's been involved in worldwide events that, just personal things that he was interested in, and so he continued to participate in these activities. And then he said, I think I really need to let my colleagues know what's happening, because he was in charge of putting together a worldwide conference in 2019. So he wrote this note to his colleagues, an email. Dear friends and colleagues, the last couple of years has brought momentous change in our lives. It started in late 2016 when we noticed the first signs that my memory was not as good as it used to be. Please note how well he writes. In 2017, I had comprehensive brain scans and received a diagnosis of early signs of Alzheimer's disease, which we shared immediately with our family. Back in 2014, I proposed that a symposium take place in 2019 and held for the first time in Europe, a joint venture of two main organizations. I assumed the co-leadership role in the planning of the event with my English colleagues. As a matter of principle, and given my key role in conceiving the event, I felt I needed to inform selected representatives of my diagnosis. I expect that over time I may need to transfer responsibility for some tasks to go to others. Another recommended step was to schedule a driving exam. Now listen to this. Well, who do you know wants a driving exam, especially somebody with dementia? I hold the keys, I don't give them up. He says, the recommendation was to stop driving. I immediately stopped driving, not wanting to risk other people on the road. My wife and I will be traveling to Europe in April for family, social, and matters pertaining to the conference. I will be in France, Germany, and England, while my wife will travel to Croatia and Greece. We will meet up midway for a few days, then travel separately until our flight home. Thankfully, public transportation is much more available there. So life goes on. We're very confident that we'll find workable solutions for the many still open issues, and thank you for your support. The nice thing is he got a lot of letters of support, all is well. But if you think about that letter, he is going to be in Europe for 3 weeks, actually 4 weeks, traveling pretty much on his own. He'll be seeing family members. It's all very organized. I asked him, what are you doing with your medications? How are you? He has it all arranged, and he's very proud of himself. In his meantime, his wife is sitting there with her eyes spinning. As she trusts that he can do this time, but then he expects to take another long trip this summer, and she worries about that. He's an interesting guy. You can already see where he's starting with the, nah, it's okay. I'll be okay. I know what I'm doing. She, of course, is terrified that he's going to get lost in Europe. So we made a list of what he needed. You have to have a list of everyone that you're going to visit with their phone numbers and their addresses, when you're going to be seeing them. You have to have a list of your itinerary. So those were helpful. He already had a list of all his medications and other people that he could contact if something happened. In a situation like that, it's a tremendous risk, but I would consider that a good denial, because he still has the competency. You heard how he wrote, and he is able to do a lot of things. So in the best of all worlds, I'll let you know in May whether he gets lost or not. But I tend to think he won't, at least not on this one. Okay, so what's unhealthy denial? Unhealthy denial is the Bradley boys. The Bradley boys, all right, so their father got lost on several occasions, but after talking with him, the boys decided he'd be okay in his apartment. So they arranged. They were very proud of themselves. They had food delivered. They signed him up for senior transportation. and they each took turns calling him during the week to make sure he was okay. He assured them that he was going to the Y for exercise and his poker game, and he reported that he'd gone to the doctor to ask about his memory. I would like you to flag that, to ask about his memory. He went alone, and even got to the dentist. Then the oldest son, Charlie, got a call from the Y asking if their father was okay. They hadn't seen him in a while. So the boys thought they were doing a terrific thing, and it was the hard way that they found out that his house was a mess. There wasn't any medication. The medication was all over the place. The there was no food in the house, essentially. So they had to learn the hard way that their denial, and they just, they're busy guys. They've got families of their own. But they couldn't continue to do it. So that was him. I'm not going to give you the scenario of what happened after that, because it was quite a process. But what he did do is he refused care at home. They did try to put care at home. They tried to get a home health aide in place, and he slammed the door. Nothing you haven't heard before, or if you haven't heard it, people don't like to have anybody coming into the home. It's my home. I don't want you here. Goodbye. Thank you very much. And then he refused to move. He wasn't going to move. So what did they have on their hands? They had this mess. And it's possible, there's never any guarantee that starting early is going to fix it, but certainly starting early opens the door to one discussion after another, and you open it slowly, and you can have the discussions along the way so that it's not this big bang boom, you have to move, you have to change, blah, blah. So what happens when you're not prepared? People overdose on medications. They double up. They don't know what they've done. They lose the medications. Accidents. You can have an accident any place. Obviously, anything from bumping into a wall and falling down a flight of steps or falling in the shower, accidents can happen. You can leave the stove on. You can leave the water running. These are all things that we know about and we worry about. Family conflict. When there is a lot of denial, the family conflicts often come out big time. Mom sounds fine. Why are you so worried? Dad always needed someone to help him with directions. Why is that a big deal? I can't get the keys away from him. You try. She won't allow anyone in the house except me. And that raises the question of who becomes the caregiver and what role are you taking on that is necessary, and what role are you taking on because you have to be the caregiver and you don't want anyone else to do it, which has its own problems. Accusations fly. Refusal to help is common. Someone gets accused of overreacting and the additional care is not needed because mom or dad can be retrained. Mom can do it. We just have to show her. You're going to show your mother how to cook when she showed you how to cook. And by the way, if she knew how to cook, she would. But that's a detail. How to get dressed. Mommy can get dressed if you just put the clothes out for her. And, I do that every night. I go there every night. I put the clothes out for her. And we think that she's getting dressed, but then you come to find out she's not getting dressed. So people have ideas that things can work out if they only will it to be so. The problem, too, is that when family's in denial, it's the person with the illness who often gets left out because there's all this arguing going on around them. You've got the one person saying he needs care at home, we can't leave him alone. You've got somebody else saying just put him into an assisted living. He's just going to have to accept that that's where he's going to go. There's no question that's what has to happen. In the early stages of dementia, a spouse or child can handle the responsibilities, but like a lobster in a pot where the heat increases, you can take care of a person with pretty much any illness for a period of time. But certainly with dementia, Dad was so terrific. He was just so easy to handle. I don't know why people think that it's difficult to live with somebody with dementia. And then all of a sudden, Dad is not so nice, and he's not so compliant, and he's wandering, or he's aggressive, or he's angry, or he just wants to sleep. He doesn't want to be bothered doing much of anything else. So the pot is slowly heating up. And who's in the pot? The caregiver. You know this. So we know that if you start the conversation slowly over time, you might avoid the pot and the boiling caregiver. When you delay help, it wears the caregiver down. It becomes confusing when the person conflates information, like the father who told his sons that, yes, he was going to the Y, he was doing really well, he went to his doctor to get a diagnosis about his dementia. Well, he didn't realize that it was dementia, but he went to the doctor to find out what was wrong. Nobody went with him. But the family ultimately suffers from lack of information, fragmented information, and you begin to blame the person. He's not telling the truth. And then forget all the other kinds of things that can happen. He thinks his mother is alive. She died 14 years ago. Why doesn't he understand that? Because that's part of the illness. But again, if you don't go back and read about the illness and become informed, those are the kinds of things that will surprise you and take you aback. And you'll argue, no, Daddy, Mommy died, Daddy or Grandma died 14 years ago. That's just not going to make much sense to the person with dementia. You can say that to somebody with a chronic illness, but you can't say it to someone with dementia. The arguments that ensue are terrible and can worsen the dementia. So there was a woman that came into my support group, and she was being she was getting worn down because her husband would suddenly wake up in the middle of the night and say, I have to go home. But he was insistent on getting in the car and going. So they would get into the car and drive around, and then she would take him back home. And sometimes he was calm, he had forgotten what he was looking for, and sometimes he would persist, and they would be driving for a couple hours at night until he finally got tired. One night, she said, he sat on the couch waiting for a friend to come pick him up. She said, why are you sitting on the couch? Who's coming to pick you up? He didn't know the name. He didn't know where they were going. He just knew that this old friend of his was coming to pick him up and they were going someplace. He sat there for 4 hours. And not much that she could do about it. At least she didn't argue with him. But it's easy to argue. Go back to bed, Daddy. Go back to bed, Mommy. What are you doing up? Why are you? Nobody's here. You didn't have a phone call. Well, yeah, you had a phone call. You just weren't around to hear it. So it's a big picture. But the best you can do is to prepare as much as possible. One of the biggest preparations, and the Bradley boys got stuck on this one, they did not prepare financially. One of them said, he has to go to an assisted living. Well, that's fine. Do you know what they cost? How much money do you have? How long do you think it'll last? And if you don't know any of that, you're signing yourself up for trouble. So much like Alice, the daughter, was taking care of her mother, and she said the same thing, well, Mommy has to go into an assisted living. And she and her sister agreed, and they put Mommy into an assisted living. And then they went and took a look at her bank accounts and whatever money she had, and find out that she had a reverse mortgage on the house, which they didn't know about, and that she had had a life insurance policy that she cashed out, so that money was no longer there. So they had to take her mother out of the assisted living and start over again with planning. So the question, the theme is enough is enough. Every step along the way, enough is enough when you reach a point where you know that the next step is not a good one. It's not an easy one. Telling someone that they can no longer live in their home as you well know, as any of us would feel, is unfair. What do you mean I can't live in my home? I've been here for 15, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. I mean, this is where I live. And they can't envision any place else. And then you say, well, Mommy, it's really a beautiful place. I want you to go to the assisted living. Will you go? And Mommy says, absolutely not. Why does Mommy say absolutely not? It's an abstraction. Mommy doesn't really get what an assisted living is. Mommy knows that you're asking her to leave her house. So Mommy is not going to go to an assisted living. So how do you approach that? You approach things like that by going to the assisted livings, looking at them yourself, finding out what they cost, what you can afford, and then when you have a couple picked out, then you bring her to one or two, and you limit it, of course, because you don't want to confuse a person terribly. So what's affordable? What can you manage? The other part of preparation is legal planning. If you don't have all your legal paperwork in order, you're also setting yourself up for trouble. So somebody's in a hospital and they say, well, the doctor will talk to me. I'm the son. I'm the daughter. No, they won't. Sometimes they will, but without that legal document that says you are the power of attorney, they're not obligated to talk to you. As a care manager, I can tell you that doctors do talk to me. I'm not related. So I have to divert them back to the family. But can you imagine having to prove that you are somebody's child? So without that documentation, that's what you have to do. Double work, very exhausting, very difficult on you because now the pot is getting hotter. And you want to have relationships with the doctors and anyone that has communication with your loved one. So how do you know when enough is enough? There's a doctor, Dr. Daniel McCullough, who wrote a book called My Mother, Your Mother, and I always hearken back to it. I think what he did was utterly brilliant. And he wrote this book many years ago, but its premise holds true. And that is he took care of he was a geriatrician in Boston. His mother lived in a different state. And probably from the time that she was in her 60s, maybe early 70s, he would visit and track her. How is she doing? What is she doing? What is she able to do? What is she not able to do? Obviously, as a physician, he had access to, and her son, he had access to the doctors. And of course, because he's a geriatrician and he has a doctor, doctors will talk to him. So he planned every step along the way what changes would occur and in a discussion with her because she was competent. And that's the other key piece of it. You start the conversation when a person is competent and can make their own decisions. You may get resistance, like, no, I'm not leaving my home, but you can have a conversation with, well, we've got to figure this out. We don't have too many options here. We have to figure out where you are safest. If you don't want someone in the home, where would you want to be? With whom? What we also keep in mind is that you're not always the best person to have that conversation with them. Sometimes it has to be somebody else in the family. Sometimes it has to be the doctor. Doctors are usually very good at conveying this kind of information and having the discussion. It could be a neighbor. It could be a rabbi, priest, imam. It could be just somebody that person really trusts. And if that's the person who makes the difference, one of the things that caregivers have a hard time giving up is the control. Well, you can't control everything, and you're not going to control this. And if you are not the best person to talk to Mommy, and your brother, whom you don't like, is the best person, let the brother do it. And by the way, let him take the heat, too. So, preparation. Do you need an elder law attorney? Do you need a geriatric care manager? Do you need an adult care advisor? Do you know what the county resources are? Do you have a good doctor? Very often, older adults are told, well, you're just getting a little older. Automatically, you've got to question if this is the best doctor for this person. Automatically, you have to think about that. Well, she's just getting old. What do you expect? And even in this day and age, I hear that people are told that. It's sort of a shame. So sometimes you have to change doctors, you have to change everything that you're doing. There are very good reasons to have diagnostic testing done. You want to eliminate things that you can't see. Maybe somebody has medications that are contradicting one another. Maybe a person has something like a brain tumor. Maybe there are other kinds of physical issues that are causing forgetfulness. I'm working with a couple now. They've been in their house for well over 50 years, and they have to move. They're reasonably bright and alert. He is terrific. He's in good shape, but he has some physical issues that are really prompting this move. And she has been showing the signs of I don't think it's Alzheimer's, but certainly memory loss. And now that they are confronted, they went to see a place, they liked it, it's a beautiful place. He is very much looking forward to this move. She is frantic. She's frantic partly because she's a hoarder. Not the house, not the upstairs, but apparently the basement is a nightmare, and I can assure you I've never seen it. And I'm happy to not see it. But the family is aware of that, and the upstairs is pristine, it's beautiful. It's got tchotchkes all over, every surface has stuff. So eventually they're going to have to get rid of all of that, and that is causing her enormous anxiety. And the daughter-in-law told me the other day that she is experiencing tremendous anxiety, and as a result, her memory is even worse. Because I saw her a week and a half ago, and her memory was not that bad. But the closer you get to that kind of a change, for someone who's already vulnerable, you're going to see greater changes, and the anxiety can definitely cause it. So a differential diagnosis can be extremely helpful, because you want to make sure that you're eliminating any other cause except for the possibility of dementia. So when they refuse help at home, and this I just harken back to what I just said, who's the best person to talk to them? You can't cajole, you can't force, you can't just send. I remember my great aunt did this. She lived in New York many years ago, and her memory was shot. But she was very charming. And her son, who lived in the Midwest, got a home care worker. She opens up the door. She was very pleasant. She was a little tiny woman. She was very pleasant. She said, "Thank you so much," and slammed it. That was the beginning and end of home care. And ultimately, he had to bring her out to where he lived, and she lived in a facility for the remainder of her life. So and it comes down to what's affordable. You can have all the plans in the world. When the Bradley brothers wanted to put their father into an assisted living, they found out, much the way other people find out, that he didn't have that kind of money. Plain and simple. It wasn't. And the other part of it is, and somebody said this to me the other day, we've been trying to get the paperwork together to get Daddy into an assisted living, or to get Daddy eligible for Medicaid, because we think he might need it down the road. Said, but my sister is a little slow in pulling the paperwork together, and she insists on doing it. She said, I think we've lost 3 years. So at the point that they start, they're going to have 5 years of a look back before they're even moderately eligible. So when you are, and the good news on that front is that this daughter doesn't think that he'll actually need it. But you don't know. One fall, one massive something or other, and there you are without the ability to pay for an assisted living or a nursing home for that matter. So that, I think, I'm going to wrap it up here because I think that gives you a lot of information. So the idea of when is enough, and you're pulling your hair out, don't get to that point. Don't be the lobster in the pot. Try to plan a little bit early as you can, be observant, watch. And when you find yourself in the middle, so I know that oftentimes, especially I know from the coalition, people are already in the midst of taking care of someone by the time they come seeking help. And so you have to start at a deficit. You're already the caregiver, you're already have figured out some of the finances, but now your mother is psychotic at times and difficult to handle, and how you then manage what to do with your mother at that point in time is a process, and quite a long process. So I'll stop here and start.